This video is the first video in a new series to celebrate the launch of my new book, Grow Food for Free, which is coming out at the end of February. And Grow Food for Free is a complete guide to show you how to grow an abundance of food, whether you're in a urban or a rural area, without needing any money. And it would mean the world to me if you could go and pre-order a copy now, and the link is provided down below in the video description. Hello and a very warm yet breezy welcome back to the vegetable garden. It's mid-January, about 8:30 in the morning, and today I'm going to do some weeding. Not reading, but weeding. And I'm going to show you the strategy that I use to make sure that I'm not overrun by weeds throughout the growing season. And I'm also going to show you why weeds happen in the first place. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll feel confident that you'll not be completely weed free, because it's almost impossible, but you'll never feel overrun by weeds. A weed is simply an undesirable plant which is growing in a cultivated location, and it's usually brought in by weed seeds, whether that's grass or thistles, nettles, dandelions, things like that. And usually they'll land on something like a raised bed or a container where you're growing something else, and then it grows. The problem though isn't having one weed, the problem is having lots of weeds. In a vegetable garden, there are three primary reasons why weeds occur. The first one is a natural way with the seeds. The second one is because it's a natural protection of the soil. Soil is not used in nature to be bare. That's why things like grass and shrubs and plants grow over it, to protect and insulate the soil and to protect the life underneath. So by having bare soil, weeds will try and grow to protect it, almost as a plaster over a wound, to keep the soil nice and healthy. And the third biggest reason why weeds grow is because of excessive tilling or digging of your beds. All this does is it will bring up ungerminated weeds closer to the surface, or to the surface, where they will then sprout and grow. And also you've damaged the soil structure, so we go back to the second reason why the weeds will also grow to protect it. This garden is around about 90% no dig, and the other 10% is 10% of minimum tillage. So I really try and not cause too much damage to the soil with this 10%. And I'll most likely do a video later on in the year explaining all of these different systems, so you can get a better understanding of the different systems that are out there. Now, since we've adapted from even quite a low dig to a no dig method, we've noticed that the weed numbers have just absolutely plummeted, which is an absolute blessing, because it means we can put a lot more focus into actually growing the food rather than having to go around and grab those pesky weeds. It's currently midwinter, and it's quite a blessing because weed growth is at a minimum, if at all. However, in a couple of months it's going to be March, and that means much longer days, the temperatures are going to be rising, and the weed seeds are going to be germinating. So before I tell you the actual strategy, I'm going to tell you what you need to do now in January and February to put you on the front foot when it comes to dealing with weeds later on in the year. The first thing that you want to do is to dedicate some time, like I'm doing this morning, to eliminate the garden of any weeds which are currently growing, because with slight rises of temperatures they can really grab hold. And the problem with weeds as they grow older is that they get harder and harder to pull out. So spend a day, it'll take less than a day, I assure you of that, unless you've got a massive garden, but dedicate a day, probably in early February, so you can rest for a bit longer. Dedicate a day to eliminate as many weeds as you possibly can from the garden. And then the second thing you need to do is, if you haven't yet put down a mulch of compost onto your raised beds, put down that mulch as soon as possible really, and you can cover that with either cardboard, some landscape fabric, or some newspaper, and that's just going to help suppress any weed growth in March. And so if you're going to be planting in that raised bed, say in April or May, you can keep that covering over and simply remove it when it comes to planting time, and you're going to have a beautiful bed which doesn't have a single weed in sight, and you can go straight for the planting. After doing those 2 mid to late winter jobs, you then move into a new strategy, which is a spring and summer strategy. And this is the most important one because this is when all of the weeds are going to be really growing and going for it and being adamant that they'd like to take over your garden, but really you want to grow vegetables instead of weeds. And I know a lot of weeds are edible and a lot of weeds are useful, and I'll come on to that in a different video, but for now it's really important in a lot of the growing areas to just keep it weed free. So to begin, starting in March, if you haven't had a chance to cover any raised beds yet, the first thing to do is, if any beds are not going to be grown in until later on in spring, just put a few sheets of cardboard down. This is not only going to stop the weeds, but it's actually going to work in your favour as a slug bait or a slug trap, because slugs usually will go and hide under something during the night. So you can turn this into a 2-in-1, where not only are you stopping the weeds growing in early spring, but every morning you can go and check and flip the cardboard over and pick off any slugs, which is only going to help you throughout the rest of the entire growing season. Now, the strategy properly kicks in when you use something called a little and often approach. And for me, I find this incredibly useful because I can easily procrastinate or easily get overwhelmed. And fortunately, we don't have many weed problems, and I'm good and determined at keeping on top of weeds as well as slugs. But I know it's so important to do that because otherwise things will get out of hand. So what do I mean by the little and often principle? Well, all it is to dedicate a flexible time block, and flexible is really crucial here because otherwise you're going to end up missing it on certain weeks. But to have a flexible time block dedicated to weeding. And again, this is just once a week. And the reason why I've chosen once a week is because weed growth in a single week is going to be very small, and they won't have had much of an opportunity to develop strong root systems. And it's the strong roots which make them a right pain to remove from the garden and your containers and raised beds. So once a week is all. And little and often is so important as well, because the key word there is little. It's not having to do much. And for a person like myself, I can get pretty easily overwhelmed, or I'm an absolute expert procrastinator. But I know that keeping on top of weeds is so important, because the longer I leave it, the worse it gets, and the more likely I am to procrastinate. And just with a week of weeds growth, you can easily just go around, look around your beds, pull out any weeds by hand, or if you've got a larger area, just use a hoe of your choice for removing the weeds. And so for us, we have around about 30 raised beds, and this should take us no longer than around 15 minutes a week, having a quick scout around and removing any weeds. And for me, I find it really satisfying, because when I go into the garden during spring and summer and I have a look around, I don't get put off by seeing a lot of weeds, and a lot of people experience this. And this is something that, as gardeners, you don't deserve to go into your garden and be instantly put off by it. And often it happens because people bite off more than they can chew. So if you put yourself in that category, and I have done in the past, just scale back a bit this year. Get used to managing that and the weeds, and I guarantee you the following growing year you'll be, I can do it, it's easy. And that little and often is so important. If you also have a forgetful brain like I do, it's always worth noting it down on your calendar, or doing something like writing it on a post-it and sticking it on the bathroom mirror, so you can be reminded to do that little and often weeding session a week. And you can even just do 5 minutes here or there. You can split that time block into however many segments you want. But I find 15 minutes go really quickly. I can listen to about 3, 4, maybe even 5 songs as I'm doing it. Then I finish, I can get on with the day, and I have a guilt-free mind, and I know that the garden is weed-free. So I can go into the garden and just not feel put off, and I can just really enjoy the important part, and that's the growing. When you move from summer into autumn, the nights really begin to decrease and the temperatures drop, and as a result the weed issues or the weed growth drops as well, and it's a very nice welcome to not have to worry too much about the weeds. So from August onwards you can progressively begin to reduce the amount of time you do the little and often, so you can change it from once a week to once every 2 weeks. And then by November, once you've finished harvesting most of the autumn veggies and you've just got the winter vegetables left, that's when you should add compost and cover the beds, and you don't need to worry about weeds at all until the next spring, because no weeds are going to grow when the beds are covered. And in spring you're so excited because you remove the covers and you can go straight into planting. So imagine a whole winter or going into the garden in spring and not having a weed in sight in the growing area. That is such a lovely feeling, and I want all of you to be able to feel that as well, because it's only going to motivate you more. Don't forget to pre-order your copy of Grow Food for Free today, and there's also a US edition, so that link will, if you're in the US, will take you to the US site, and in the UK to the UK site. And if you have any questions or any tips regarding weeding, I would love to see them down below in the comment section. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.